Let's talk about the iPhone 8 and the Touch ID sensor, because people are kind of losing their minds about this stuff and we really don't know what's going on. All right, so the rumor is, and this seems pretty solid, that the iPhone 8 is going to have a taller display that fills up more of the front of the phone without the top and bottom bezels, sort of like the Galaxy S7 and LG G6 and the rumored upcoming Pixel 2. And I think this is a good thing. Like, this taller display aspect ratio is the right thing for smartphones. It really fits with how we use smartphones, and it lets us put more screen in our pocket without having bigger phones. But it presents a problem for Apple because they've always had this little room for the home button at the bottom, and that's where the Touch ID sensor goes. And Touch ID is crucial to the whole iOS experience. I mean, it's how we unlock our phones. It's how we authenticate purchases with Apple Pay and in apps, and we log into secure apps. I mean, Touch ID is everywhere. So if they're going to replace it or move it, it's got to be something really, really good because we use it all the time. They either have to put it underneath the display, or they have to put it around the back, or they have to scrap fingerprints entirely and go with something else like facial recognition or iris scanning or something. So let's talk about these real quick. The facial recognition or iris scanning thing, that's maybe a good idea. Facial recognition is already in a bunch of Android phones and it's terrible. You can defeat it with a photo and it's not fast enough, it's not accurate enough. Iris scanning, which is in the Galaxy Note 7, rest in peace, and the Galaxy S8, that works pretty fast and it can be defeated, but it's a lot trickier and it's generally as good as your fingerprint. There's good facial recognition. Microsoft does it with Windows Hello, but that requires two cameras up front, a regular RGB camera, and then some sort of infrared or depth sensing camera, and it's much, much harder to spoof. You can't just hold up a photo and spoof it. Now there's rumors that Apple is going with a two-camera setup in the front of the iPhone 8 anyway, because they want to do things like portrait mode for selfies and stuff. So that's one possibility, but it's got side effects. Some of the drawbacks are you have to face the phone towards you, and that's really obnoxious when you're doing purchases. And it's also really obnoxious when you've got your phone laying on the desk and you just want to unlock it and check some stuff and leave it on the desk because it's not facing your face. So what about having Touch ID but having it on the back of the phone? Well, Apple is not one to mar the back of their phone with dimples and cutaways and stuff like that. So I don't really think there's a good place for them to put their capacitive sensor like they have for Touch ID on the back in a way that you can find it and touch it. Now, some people really like the fingerprint sensors on the back of things like the Google Pixel. It is comfortable when you're picking up the phone out of your pocket to touch the back of the phone and get that authentication that way, but it's terrible if you've got it laying flat on the table, and it's not quite as convenient when you're holding it up to, a payment terminal to do your purchases. So that comes to the third and best possible solution, but probably the hardest one too. That is to have the fingerprint sensor on the front where it normally is, but there's display there. So they just put it underneath the display, behind the pixels. Now this is not impossible. Qualcomm has worked on this before. They have an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner they actually shipped in a Xiaomi phone called the Mi 5S, I think, that could go under glass, but not under the display itself. They have a new one that can go through the display. And they're working with a company called Vivo to bring that into a phone, but that's not coming out till like next year or something. That does not mean that it's too late for Apple, because Apple does not rely on Qualcomm's technology for this stuff. Apple acquired a company called Authentech in 2005 for $350-something million to get their fingerprint authentication and security technology, which they branded Touch ID.
It's what led us to create Touch ID.
And those people didn't just disappear once they got their Touch ID. Most of those engineers work at Apple working on Touch ID stuff. In fact, when the iPhone 6S came out, so many people noticed how much faster Touch ID was. They're like, wow, it's so fast now, it's so much more accurate. That's because it's a second generation Touch ID sensor. It's been in the iPhone 6S, the iPhone 7, and now in the new second generation iPad Pros, the 10.5 inch and the second gen 12.9 inch. So maybe those authentic people working at Apple now, maybe they've been working on this for quite some time. Maybe they're working on a facial recognition feature that has like a wide field of view camera, so you don't have to point it quite so exactly at you. The problem is there's no solution here that is really clear and easy for Apple. The only clear, easy solution is put a fingerprint sensor on the back that's capacitive, that has, you know, the ridge around it so you can feel it and everything. And that's just not something that Apple is likely to do. But they can't not have some sort of fast, easy, reliable, better than a password biometric identification in the iPhone 8. So what's the most likely thing?